Okay, so this is module 11, lesson 2, where we're talking about what the thoughts are that happen when you are in a trauma response, how to identify them so that you can target them for the 6 steps to heal a trauma response process. So if you remember, the last lesson was me reading the BuzzFeed poll that identified what people said when they realized that they were having trauma responses that they thought was just part of their personality. And so now we're going to go back through them, and I'm going to help you identify what a potential thought could be connected to that statement. And when I say a potential thought, I mean we can guess at what somebody might be thinking. And I want you to have an idea about what the ballpark guesses could be so that you could think about what you might be thinking to identify your thoughts when you find yourself in a trauma response that may be similar. So let me know for sure, take notes, and let me know in our group meetings if what I've identified as thoughts is the same for you or different for you so that we can talk about it and I can help you through as you're working the steps. So the first one is remaining neutral. I don't have a favorite color or a favorite food. I go with whatever. If someone ignores what I want, I really speak up for myself. I rarely speak up for myself because I generally don't care that much. I'm the quietest person in the room. I live in the gray area. Nothing is ever black and white for me. So the thought there could be, I don't matter. I'm not important. The focus that you would want to have, if this is something that was typical for you, is how is it that I show apathy toward myself? And again, where in my body history does that come from? So if I were to guess for this person where that would be in their body history, I got to move my camera. I'm going to move it to over here. If I were to guess where that might be in someone's body history, that body history may be coming from an experience of being ignored or having their preference and thoughts and desires not matter in the family that they came from. If someone ignores what I want, I rarely speak up for myself because I generally don't care that much. That is a really good example of learned helplessness, where we stop caring about ourselves about something because we've learned to stop caring. Okay. Next one is hyperindependence. So here, the focus is on anytime you find yourself being hyper independent, thinking you don't need other people. Again, the thought would be, I'm not important or no one will help me. So listen to those potential thoughts as I read the statement again. I thought that was a great thing until I realized I was born out of trauma where I could not rely on caretakers. There are so many. I've been guilty of this myself, where I don't believe I'm important enough for anybody to help me. So I get superwoman syndrome going and I do everything myself because I believe no one will help me. Where does that come from? It comes from a past of not being cared for, not being able to rely on caregivers. So the thought, I'm not important or no one will help me. What else could come up? If this is something that you find yourself doing, what thoughts drive this behavior for you? Next, the focus is on the startle response. And the thought is, I'm not safe, or some version of it, right? I'm going to get hurt. I can't stand abrupt, loud noises. They jar me emotionally and physically. It's a learned response from hearing my drunken dad raging at my mom. I used to lay still in bed, hoping the yelling and slamming would stop. Now think about it. That startle response, I'm going to get hurt or I'm not safe. If you're having that jarring experience, it's likely that that is connected to your belief that you're still not safe, or your trauma brain telling you you're not safe. A little puppy who is basically I call her a horse elephant playing in her crate because I can't trust her not to chew on the carpet. So sorry about the background noise. So here's another example. When I was several years back, I was a passenger in a car accident and I could have died there. It's a long story, but I could have died there. And then every time I was a passenger after that in a car and somebody else, another driver, drove erratically or fast around us, my body again had a startle response. When the accident happened, my thought, I was waiting to die. I actually was holding myself and waiting to die. And so every time a fast moving car happened on the freeway and I was a passenger, my trauma response went straight there. And I'm going to die was the thought. Now, it isn't true. I focused on that thought to make that trauma response go away, but you can see how that applies. The third one is if you're finding yourself withdrawing, again, the thought is, I'm not safe. And when you're going to be looking at this in the 6 steps, you're going to say, okay, that thought, I'm not safe, is that true now? My parents wonder why I'm single and never date. I even told them, they never understand. It's a result of how I grew up in a house where the best way to cope was to withdraw. If I'm saying I'm not safe, the thought behind this would be I'm not safe, could be I'm not important, some kind of variation. So you got to think about the thought that comes really quick under the radar when something happens to you and you find yourself in a trauma response. Here's another one. This is the focus when you find yourself people pleasing. People pleasing meaning you want something for yourself, or maybe you don't have any wants for yourself. And this comes out of believing that you're not important. So thought, I'm not important. For me, it was that I never had a negative answer. I never had an answer for things like what foods do I hate or what are your deal breakers. I was just always okay with everything, never rocked the boat, never considered how I felt about anything. It was wild. Now that I'm in therapy, I realize it's because my needs, wants, likes, and dislikes never mattered. So I never even formed them. When we don't form our needs, wants, and likes, we end up going with what everybody else wants. And so if we're thinking we're not important or I don't have needs, my needs don't matter, that could be the foundation of behaviors like this. Next one, looking at the thought, the focus is overeating. The thought, I'm going to get hurt. So let me read this and see if you can hear, I'm going to get hurt. Eating a lot. So that eating a lot is the trauma response they didn't realize was not a personality trait. When I was a kid, my parents called me fat all the time and once would say that I should eat less. My dad specifically would control how much I'd eat and shame me in front of everyone present whenever he saw me eating a meal. As a result, I would eat enormous amounts when no one was looking, then I'd vomit it all later, cry, and beg my mom and grandma not to tell my dad because he would beat me. So, eating a lot connected to fear of getting hurt. There's another aspect of this. If you eat a lot but nobody beat you, what are the messages that you say to yourself about overeating? Where did it come from? In the family I grew up in, overeating was a way of coping. And I never wanted to overeat, but as I overcame my eating disorder from anorexia and then moved into another direction of binge eating, I did it in the closet because I believed, here's the thought. If anybody sees me eating, they'll think I'm fat. You can hear the distortion in it. But the distortion is where if anybody sees me eating, they'll think I'm fat, even though I was rail thin. You can see that wasn't real, but it was a belief that drove the fearful behavior. Next, defending yourself when you don't have to. The thought is right there in the quote. I'm so defensive when expressing my emotions and feelings as though I have to make a case for my lived experience. Even when I do have all the receipts, all the reasons to know my experience is valid, I minimize my own feelings as I express them, just so no one else can. See, no one else thinks my feelings are important. It drives my friends crazy how I can't tell a story without interjecting every other sentence with, but it doesn't matter. But I deserved it, or something to that effect. You can see the thoughts in that quote. I don't matter. I deserve to be treated badly. Something like that. That's what you're looking for when you're thinking about the behaviors you do. And if you were to explain them as if you were in part of this BuzzFeed poll, that's what you would be looking for, those kinds of thoughts. I keep moving my mouse. I don't need to. Next is reading people's behavior. So this is hypervigilance. The thought is I'm unsafe or something else, right? Reading people's behavior, especially the people in my house. I pay attention to their footsteps, their tone, their expressions. We can be unsafe in more ways than just worried that somebody's going to fly off the handle and hit us. Your body history will tell you what that unsafe is. You don't have to tell anyone the story, but your body will tell you. If you say, what is this about? Why am I afraid? There will be a truth. It's actually a lie that feels like the truth because it's been repeated so many times, but there will be a truth that comes up in your body in the form of a thought. And here it's, I'm unsafe. Here's a trauma response based on keeping the peace. And the thought is, I'm not safe. I have to keep everybody else safe. So if you read this statement, you hear, she went to sleep. I'm learning that hyperactive puppies are tired, so they need a nap. And that's what we've got. So having people feel extremely calm around me turned out to be a trauma response. More specifically, it was me keeping the peace. I never wanted anyone to be uncomfortable around me, which included compromising my own comfort. I was so proud of it too. So this is a situation where if you're uncomfortable and you're learning, you're keeping everybody else safe, but you're absorbing it, you could be saying, it's my job to keep other people safe. It's okay for me to have pain as long as other people are happy. There are a whole different range of thoughts that could be driving this kind of behavior, right? This person says, it's my job to keep everybody safe. So we're looking for the beliefs behind the statements. Number 10, the focus. When you find yourself shutting down emotionally, this thought could be, I'm unlovable. I thought it was normal for me not to react, not to feel anything, or not to express my emotions. I realized that I was like this because I was always emotionally abandoned as a child. I feel that it's useless crying for someone who won't be there for me. It's useless loving someone who'd eventually leave me. So I'm unlovable and my life will never change. And this is hopeless. I'll never deserve love. So you can see those thoughts behind. You can see those thoughts behind this statement. 11, assuming you know what other people are feeling, mind reading. The thought is, I'm unsafe. And it's really unsafe thinking about what will other people do or feel, what will happen to me if I'm not keeping the peace. So taking responsibility for other people's emotions looks like not saying what you need, not saying what your preferences are because you're worried about other people getting mad or feeling hurt, getting upset. And the worst case scenario, being worried about somebody else taking their life. That's in an emotionally abusive situation where sometimes abusive people will threaten suicide if you leave them. And that's the ultimate of you feeling responsible for somebody else's emotions. We're not responsible for other people's emotions. We're not responsible for what they do or say. But as children, we learn to moderate our own behaviors. You've learned this in the earlier parts of this course, so that we can, we believe, control the outcome of other people's behaviors. And it's not true. That's a little kid way of thinking. And that little kid way of thinking leads us to stifling ourselves, going overboard for ourselves, because we think we know what other people feel, and because we want to protect them from their own experience. It's not okay. This one, crying from conflict. And the thought behind this one, potentially, is it's not safe for me to say anything. Crying when giving my honest feelings or opinions. Difficult to stop and feel safe expressing my feelings. So this may have been a person who, in their body history, there are reminders of someone getting upset with them if they cry or if they give their honest feelings or opinions. Something happened when they express themselves honestly. Next, soothing other people. This is similar to taking responsibility for other people's feelings. And the thought behind it, again, I'm unsafe. I used to be one of those people who said I'm an empath, so I have to feel other people's feelings, and therefore making them feel better makes me feel better. Actually, it was just me internalizing the idea that my quality of life depended on specific people being in a good mood. You can hear the childhood trauma in that. If I do well enough, I was that person. If I do well enough to take care of a parent's feelings, the parent won't harm me. I'm not safe. I have to perform. I have to please other people to be loved. I have to please other people for them not to hurt me. 14, focus is when you don't ask for what you need. Again, the thought behind it is I don't deserve love. Occasionally crying when I witness kindness and understanding, because on some level, I'm still surprised that what I needed so desperately exists. And someone thinks I deserve that. You hear in that, this person doesn't think they deserve kind, understanding behavior toward them. I want you to identify the thoughts. I'm hoping you're getting what I'm pointing to as we're going through these slides, and you're seeing the thoughts too. The focus is fear of trusting. So when you find yourself unable to trust, the thought here is I don't deserve love. Again, let's look at the statement. I get anxious when people are super kind to me. I'm 2 months into a really great relationship with someone super sweet, and I spend a lot of time reflecting and asking myself why he was being so nice. Is it manipulation? Is it love bombing? I don't deserve love is at the basis of this. How is that I don't deserve love? Because when we don't believe that we deserve love, and then someone shows it to us, in this case, somebody just being nice, we think there has to be an ulterior motive. Most of the time it's because we haven't been given love freely. So when it does come freely, we don't trust it. And it's really not trusting, it's not trusting the other person. It's not trusting ourselves that we can let love in, or not trusting ourselves to be lovable. Okay, it's not we're looking at the 6 steps on this statement. Somebody might be tempted to say, he is honest, as one of the what's real now statements. He or she is honest. Yeah, this is talking about he. He is honest. He is trustworthy. He is kind. But instead, the correct targeted statements, because they said, anxious when people are super kind to me, the maybe correct statement about what's real now would be, I deserve kindness. I deserve to be loved. There's going to be more resistance to that, and thus it's probably more the place that the target needs to be focused toward than he's not kind. Remember, when we're using the 6 steps, we always want the statements about what's real now to be statements of quality about ourselves and our own situation. So this person, if they are in love, could say, my partner really does love me. My partner has showed that I'm lovable. right? My partner sees who I am and accepts me, those kinds of statements. This one is needing too many verifications to be able to speak up. If you find yourself in that position, the thought behind this statement is, I'm crazy. Think about this. My double and more checking, screenshotting so I can go back and check info, and doubt in my own memory, opinions, and self is due to my mom gaslighting me. I didn't even realize it on my own. My cousin told me, and I had a huge, oh, so I'm not crazy moment. My distrust in my own perception of the world was due to my mom. I was praised for communicating my skills, but they're likely due to me being intentionally misunderstood by my parents and them assuming the worst about me and me being autistic. So when we have to verify ourselves over and over again, thinking we're crazy, that will make us afraid of the world. I remember after my first very abusive relationship, I wasn't sure what was real in the world and what wasn't. I had to spend a good 6 months just checking my perceptions to see if what I knew of the world was right, or if my partner was right in the things that he had told me to try to control me. So again, needing verifications, being afraid to speak up, thinking that our thoughts maybe aren't valid or that we're crazy, that could be a trauma response, not just you feeling insecure about yourself. Next one is apologizing. You know, I've noticed everybody apologizes. You open the door, you walk through a doorway, somebody else is there, wants to go through the same doorway with you, as you in the opposite direction. People always say, I'm sorry. I think, you know what? Don't say I'm sorry for being in your skin, but it happens a lot. Constantly saying sorry and thinking I did something wrong. I think I did something wrong. Often happens in my relationship. And I've been scrutinized for a long time by my dad, but if I did just one wrong thing, that would mean that I'm stupid with no brain. So I can't get anything right, or I'm stupid is the thought. The focus is on apologizing. I sometimes will, in my relationship, even now, think that my partner is implying that I'm doing something wrong. And I don't think I'm doing something wrong. So, but I think that he thinks I'm doing something wrong. And when that happens, I get a little defensive, honestly, and say, you're telling me that I'm doing something wrong. And he says, no, I'm not telling you that you're doing something wrong. So right then, it's a perception check. I think he's saying I did something wrong when I don't think I did. And he, in fact, doesn't think I did. That's how I can check my trauma brain instead of thinking that I've done something wrong, as in this quote. So if you're always apologizing, or if you're always thinking that you're accused of doing something wrong, that could be a trauma response. That could be needing to check in and look at what your thoughts are. Isolation is the next one. The thought, I'm not allowed to feel that. I isolate myself when I'm upset or unwell. My mom was mostly great, but she ignored a lot of abuse that was going on between me and my brother, as well as the subsequent depression that came from it. So you hear the lesson, and that it's not okay for me to be sad or be upset. When I'm upset now, I like to shut myself off and deal with my own feelings and not talk about them. I also have a hard time talking about things that bother me with anyone. My mom would always get upset when I spoke up and retaliate with a bad mood or the silent treatment. There's a trauma response. Isolating yourself, the thought, I'm not allowed to feel bad. Okay, we're going through these looking for the thought. Maybe I'm explaining too much. Hypervigilance. When you find yourself hypervigilant, the thought could be, I have to be perfect. See if you can hear that. My brain automatically seeks out every possible outcome and plans for every negative. So many trauma survivors do this. It's not great. It's a useful but terrible way to live your life, always thinking the worst will happen. I have to be perfect. I have to protect myself. I have to be aware because I cannot trust that I'm safe. Those are all thoughts that could go with this statement. Rigid boundaries or being too self-protective. I don't let anyone pay for me or put me in a position where I might owe them, right? The thought could be, no one cares about me, or everyone wants to hurt me, or I have to protect myself because the world isn't safe. There are a lot of statements that could come out of this that could be the focus for you when you're looking at how to heal this trauma response. Focus, fear of speaking up, thought, I'm wrong, right? And I can't get anything right. I don't do things right. I don't think right. Justifying everything and only speaking up when I have receipts or screenshots. That also gives me a vibe of I am not allowed to have an opinion. I'm not allowed to be wrong. I'm not allowed to take risks. You see, there's a lot of possibilities in each one of these statements about what are the thoughts. And those thoughts will be different depending on what's in the body history. Feeling compelled to be sexual. The thought is I'm worthless. Considering sexual acts to repay men and thinking I owe them for basic human decency, right? I don't deserve kindness. I'll spiral and think that at least something I'll spiral and think that's at least something considered valuable about me, if nothing else. So I'm not valuable. I'm not worth kindness. Human decency is something that I'm not allowed to have. Those are thoughts that could go with this behavior. The next one, always being on the defensive. So I put the focus is if your trauma response is honesty about making mistakes, but this sounds like the truth is that it's always being on the defense. I can't stand to be wrong. And even worse than that, I hate to apologize. I think it's so shameful and embarrassing to make mistakes, even though I know we all do it. So the trauma response is difficulty being honest about making mistakes. I'm not allowed to make mistakes. It's not safe for me to make mistakes. Those are the thoughts. Oops, Next one, worrying about how a task will be seen. I'm an obsessive checker at work. I constantly do things to protect myself, worry a lot about someone publicly calling out a mistake that I might have made and the sense of shame that will trigger. I was constantly humiliated by a close family member when I was a child and when I was in an abusive relationship, and it was always in front of an audience. So this is worry about how you'll be evaluated. Everyone thinks I'm stupid, I can't do anything right. Think about the thoughts that would go into that. Being humiliated by a family member. If something goes wrong, it's always my fault. Those are some of the thoughts that can go into this. Next, the focus, taking the blame for things that aren't your fault. Some of us do that. And the thought is, it's my fault. My excessive use of sorry or taking the blame for things I have absolutely no control over, but I still feel guilt and shame over. Guilt and shame. Guilt comes from thinking you've done something wrong when maybe you haven't. I've talked earlier in this course about appropriate and inappropriate guilt. And shame is, the idea behind shame is that there's something at the core wrong with me. So feeling sorry and taking blame for things that we have no control over can come from saying it's my fault. I'm the bad one. I always hurt people. I can't do anything right. Those are some of the thoughts that can go behind this one. Next one, allowing our feelings to show around people. So the focus should be, so I realize what I've said here is, if you want to heal a trauma response in your focus, you want to shift it, it should be toward allowing your feelings to show in front of other people. The thought here is I don't deserve comfort. I don't cry in front of other people, no matter the situation. No matter if it's a totally reasonable thing to cry over, and I know that it is, I can't cry in front of other people. I have to excuse myself and make sure nobody thought I was crying. I don't deserve comfort. I don't deserve to have feelings. I'm not allowed to be myself. I'm not good enough to be close to other people. All of those are thoughts that could come here. The reason that I'm looking at all of these and saying what the potential thoughts are is because I want it to trigger you into a thought process so you can realize what, if you do some of these things, your thoughts might be. Next is being able to accept criticism. So this is being triggered and having a negative response to criticism. And the thought being, I'm in trouble. So I have pretty bad bathroom anxiety. I also regress and shut down when confronted by another woman, particularly an older one. One of my bosses was an older lady. She was very strict, but caring. Once she made a comment after I messed something up and she was upset with me. She could see my distress and reassuredly said something like, "You're not a little girl. I'm not going to spank you or anything." That's when I realized it was all for my stepmom. So constructive criticism is something that we have to all be able to deal with. But some of us, after childhood trauma, will believe that that means that we're in trouble and there's going to be some sort of consequence rather than learning from mistakes. If I'm in trouble, I can't do anything right. All of those feelings, those thoughts can drive behaviors like this. So the focus here would be keeping in touch with friends, maintaining social contacts. And if you have difficulty with it, this could be maybe one of your trauma responses. I used to think I was really bad at keeping in touch with friends. I realized over time that I have an unnatural detachment to people and I don't allow myself space to feel much. So this person is having trouble feeling feelings, probably because vulnerability doesn't feel safe to them. But the thoughts could be, nobody cares about me, or friends will hurt me, or I don't deserve to have friends. And those thoughts leads to feelings that feel so uncomfortable as to be unacceptable to experience. And so this person shuts down their feelings. Being too detached to avoid abandonment, but then getting extremely attached all too quickly once I find that person who feels just right, then I fear their abandonment. So trigger is abandonment feelings. And here, the same thoughts. I'm not lovable, right? If I'm too detached to make sure the person doesn't avoid me, doesn't abandon me, I'm doing that because I believe that I'm not good enough to be loved. And then if I get attached really quickly, find somebody who feels just right, and I fear their abandonment, this person is too good for me, I'm not lovable. I hope you can hear that in the thought in that statement. I get anxiety. So the experience here is I'm experiencing a chaotic environment. The thought, I'm going to be hurt. I get anxiety, become nervous, have shortness of breath, look for an escape when there's perceived chaos around me. And I feel helpless to control a situation. Realizing that I had choices regarding whether I engaged in these behaviors was empowering. Okay, so getting anxiety when we're experiencing chaos, this is difficulty soothing ourselves. And so if we have trouble soothing ourselves, fearing that we're going to be hurt, it's this out of control situation probably connected to believing there's extreme lack of safety. Think about what's in the body history. Chaos leading to harm. Okay, I'm going to be hurt. Someone's going to harm me. I have to hide. I need to get out. All of those might be thoughts that go with this. Saying I could be wrong, but every time I try to discuss something that I know, unless I can pull up verified sources during the discussion, I almost never speak with confidence on anything. I also over-explain. I'm so worried that people will misunderstand me because my brain works a little differently, that they'll be mad or not like me. So if you're finding yourself doing this, another one is following rules. I have a lot of anxiety and fear about getting into trouble or being yelled at, especially from figures of authority. So I can't express myself. I'm in trouble. I'm not smart. So when we have opportunities to speak our opinions and when we find ourselves withdrawing from those opportunities, it could be that we're thinking, I'm not smart. Nobody listens to me. What I say isn't important. Those are all examples of the thoughts that could be coming in from a situation like this. This allowing feelings. So for sure, part of being a survivor is not really experiencing feelings or shutting them down because they don't feel safe. And this example here is sort of a mirroring, an example of being a current situation mirroring maybe chaos in the past. So when everyone else is freaking out in a stressful situation, I'm dead calm and almost detached. That sounds like somebody who had used dissociation in childhood to survive trauma. People think it's impressive, and I used to buy it into that praise. The stress typically hits much later when no one else is around, because when no one else is around, I feel safe. That's the messed up part. Perfectionism and meticulousness. I prided myself in it until I asked myself why. The answer wasn't pretty. So allowing ourselves to feel feelings, detachment almost always comes because we believe, we have the thought, it's not safe to feel. And again, this goes back to the very beginning of the lessons in the trauma erase method. We have to learn that it's safe to feel. This is a person who experienced really the flashback trauma response of shutting down and dissociating. You know that because the trauma response later comes out. The feelings later come out when they're safe and alone. Look in the body history. What is similar? When did this happen before? So this one would be talking about when you feel unsafe, when you find yourself in situations without easy exits. And again, the thought is around safety or lack of it. My intense and panicky need to get home whenever I feel stressed or there's too much loud noise, etc. I didn't initially understand it because home was never good to me. Now, as an adult, I feel immense relief when I get home. After therapy and some reading, I realized that being locked in my room for years as a child was when the overt abuse stopped, at least when by myself, and didn't have to worry about anything else at that moment. So that turned into a need to return to my place where I'm alone, and the abuse or stress stops. You can see the mirror to the body history. And this is, I'm going to be hurt. I have to get out. I have to escape. That's a level 4 response to a situation that may not be as dangerous as what happened in childhood, but the body perceives it the same. Dissociation, I just talked about this. Since I was a kid, it's been such an ingrained and unusual behavior. I never really took a step back to understand why I have this mechanism and how prevalent it is in my life until my psychiatrist diagnosed me with dissociative identity disorder. You don't have to have that diagnosis to be using dissociation a lot. I've really come to realize how I subconsciously dissociate in difficult situations to detach myself from physical and emotional pain and feel like they weren't directly happening to me. Again, I'm unsafe. So dissociation also happens in a body up experience. So it doesn't happen just in our thoughts. It happens in body up. We feel dissociated, and if we stop when we're dissociated, we start recognizing that experience in our body and stop. It's more nonverbal. And so you actually have to evaluate it when you're not in a dissociated state. Look at what creates a dissociated state, do some grounding. I'm actually about to start, as I'm recording this, I'm getting ready to start doing some non-clinical art, therapeutic art groups here inside of Trauma Free Nation. And one of the things that we'll be doing is art projects that help us to stay mindful. Mindfulness helps counteract dissociation. An opportunity to share an opinion. So when we have an opportunity to share an opinion and we hedge about it instead of sharing. I think when in fact I know, but I could totally be remembering wrong. But believe me, I have such a bad and unreliable memory. If you flash back to my past, I'd recall something my mom said, to which she would respond, "What? I never said that. I remember saying that. You're delusional," right? So the belief here is I'm delusional. The belief is I'm not allowed to say something because I could be wrong. I don't have a good memory. I can't remember things right. Okay, there's the thought to be addressed inside that trauma response. Opportunities. So when you have opportunities to choose and you don't do it, never picking, not the restaurant, not the activity, not the people going, nor the time, the where, the how, etc. I just always do whatever everyone else wants. I don't really care, and I don't have strong opinions. That is reflective of a thought like, I'm not allowed to be happy. I'm not allowed to give my opinion. People don't care what I want. People don't like me. There's a whole bunch of thoughts that can go into, I'm not allowed to have preferences. I don't really care. I don't think it's true. Don't have strong opinions. Probably right. Why? I'm not allowed. Those are the beliefs. So remembering mistakes, and I say remembering mistakes, criticizing ourselves about mistakes, replaying conversations or texts in my head, thinking about what I should or shouldn't have said, or wish I could have said, what the other person is thinking now, and how they hate me and think that I'm stupid, and rinse and repeat. This person is saying I'm stupid. People hate me. I don't have real friends. I don't know how to be around people. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to ask for what I need. I don't have social skills. There's a lot you could put into this one. Next one, when we feel stressed, being able to completely compartmentalize things when I'm extremely stressed. That's a trauma response. During a couple of months last year, I was moving, working way too much and not taking care of myself. Things kept coming up and I would just go, well, maybe I'll have time to worry about that for a few minutes on Tuesday next week. It's a thing that's wrong that I can't deal with right now. So feeling stressed, not dealing with it now, I don't matter, could be a thought under this. I don't know how to take care of myself. I'm not allowed to slow down. It's not okay for me to rest. It's not okay for me to say no. There's a lot of reasons a person thinking processes that would go behind statements like this. Purchasing food security. That's a trauma response too. I grew up poor. We didn't always have enough food. I remember eating a can of peas as a meal. As an adult, I didn't notice how I would overbuy and stock my pantry. I realized it when we were preparing to move and just ate from our pantry for 3 months. So the thought behind it, I'm going to starve. There's not going to be enough. We're going to run out of food. I'm not safe. The impulse to lie, trauma response. It comes from an underlying belief that I'm not safe. I'm going to be hurt. I'm not loved. I'm not worthy. I spent a lot of my childhood developing a skill at lying, and I'm good at it, really good. I can count on one hand the times I've been caught. I even learned how to pretend to be caught so that my parents would think I was a bad liar and I could get away with more. I grew up in an extremely strict religious household where everything I said and did was monitored and judged. I'm not good enough, right? There's enough. It's not just I'm safe, I'm unsafe, I'm not good enough. People don't care about what I need. I'm less important than the rules. Physical punishment for minor infractions was the norm. It often went far beyond a spanking. I wasn't even doing anything that bad. But in a home where everything is a sin, you learn to just hide. I hid through lies. So I have to hide. I'm not safe. I'm unloved. I can't trust, right? I can't trust people to be safe around me. Those are a lot of thoughts that could go behind this. So there we are. There are 40 of them. Okay, so now that we've talked about and identified the thoughts behind these 40 examples, I would like you to think about if any of these are similar for you, think about what your thought patterns are. I'm hoping it has illuminated some things for you by giving you these examples. Think about what your thought patterns are when you are in trauma responses and see if you can identify like we identified here. And I'll see you in the next lesson where we're going to look at this. In this one, the focus was the developmental gap. And what was the thought? Now, in the next time, we're going to talk about what is the developmental gap? What is the thought? And what could we say to correct that in the what's real statements so that we can heal that trauma response? See you there.